Powered by GoGoat Sports in partnership with TSN. It is episode 48, season 4 of the Dregs Hockey Podcast. And it is presented by our title sponsor, Canadian Club Whiskey. We've got Scott Rintoul, who's the host, Ray, of the documentary podcast series on the West Coast Express. Long-form podcast, incredibly detailed, talking about that great line, right, of Bertuzzi and Morrison and Naslund back in the day with the Vancouver Canucks, and some of the good, some of the not so good, and the multiple interviews that Scotty did, and the storytelling is just incredible. So looking forward to having a chat with him. We'll get to headlines here. I'm in Florida. Not at the NHL hotel this time. It's a first. It's okay. It's not that big of a deal. But I had an interesting experience yesterday. Got done the meetings at about 3 o'clock, taped our TV stuff, came back, get in shorts and a t-shirt. And I've got a poolside room with a balcony, second floor, not that high. So I'm looking out over the pool, and it's a smallish hotel pool. That's what it is. It's not this big resort oceanfront setup, right? And I look over, and there's this guy, mid-40s maybe, probably needs to work out a little bit harder. He's shirtless. He's poolside. What does he care? He's got a crock of booze in his hand, like a 66 ounce of booze in his hand, in his right hand, and a paper cup in the other. And he literally sits down across from me and just starts pounding on this thing. And I'm like, oh boy, where am I staying? So, don't get those things at the League Hotel, my friend.
I would say his evening took a left turn somewhere along the way. If he's going paper cup, he's got a long road in front of him, I'm assuming.
Yeah, and what I learned, and I didn't talk to him directly, but I learned after the fact. I think he's the dad of a young baseball player who's in spring training in the local area. Now, who knows what level of player this kid is? But I'm like, well, he's having a good time. He's watching his kid play minor pro ball or trying to make his way, and then he's crushing it poolside. So, all right, headlines, and not humorous at all for the Carolina Hurricanes. Why don't we start with the Andrei Svechnikov situation? Worst case scenario, worst news that the Carolina Hurricanes could receive is that he requires season-ending surgery for an ACL injury, knee injury that takes him out for the remainder of the year. And I mean, we talked about the Hurricanes, whether Donnie Waddell should have done more to, bring in a little bit more scoring near the trade deadline. Now you take out a young talent like Svechnikov, who's got 23 goals. That is a tough pill for Brind'Amour and company to have to swallow.
Next to Sebastian Aho, their most important forward. This is devastating for them. All of a sudden, the road through the Eastern Conference, in my opinion, got a little more pliable because I really don't think Carolina is a factor without Svechnikov. I think there'll be a pain in the ass to play against. They needed to score prior to Svechnikov going out. Now that he's out, I just don't know. Unless they win every game 2-1, I don't know how they're going to do it. I really don't. It's
devastating.
It's a brutal injury, and the long-term prognosis is always good compared to what it was 40 years ago,
right,
or 30 years ago. But the problem with an ACL surgery is, generally speaking, it takes about 8 to 10 months, almost a year, till you feel really good again. He'll be back earlier than that. It's March, April, May, June, July, August, September. It's probably back maybe the 1st of November, unless he's, really lucky. But then he's got to rebuild his game again. It's a brutal injury, and feel bad for him. It's a tough one.
Yeah. So you look around the league, and Jared Bednar talked in Colorado about Arturi Lehkonen being out, a minimum 4. It's a 4 to 6 week injury. I mean, that's another tough one for a team that has dealt with injuries all season long. If there's a bright spot, it was news from Kyle Dubas, the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs, acknowledging to the media today that the break of the finger that Ryan O'Reilly suffered actually is better than what they expected. I mean, he had surgery surgically fixed. So he's not going to be out as long. And the good news is that, they expect him to be back in time for the playoffs. At the GM meetings here, Ray, right? The March meetings are generally lower key. Historically, we've seen some stuff, some rule tweaks, recommendations come out of these meetings that lead to bigger changes. That probably isn't going to be the case this time. The game is in pretty good shape. Nobody's panicking. So that's when you get into the finicky detail discussion work, right? So among the things being discussed, additional video review in either the form of a coach's challenge or the Situation Room in Toronto having the ability to review puck over glass and high sticking, not just the double minor for high sticking period, so that they don't get tagged with the phantom stick or friendly fire, right? That leads to a penalty that shouldn't have been a penalty if it's, in your own teammate's stick. Have we, and look, just for clarification, they're just talking about it. They're not making any recommendations, any of that.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Is it so? Say there's a missed high sticking penalty. I high stick you.
Right.
Can that be reviewed?
I don't believe so.
Good.
I don't believe
because
so.
if it could, what I was going to say is, what about if it's a missed trip or a missed hook?
It's endless, though, right?
It's endless. So here's what I think the league should do, and of course nobody's asking, but I'm going to tell them anyway, is that as they get through this, and whether they decide to add puck over glass review or friendly fire, high stick penalty, they should put out a document to the media, because the media means the fans get it too.
Right.
Here are the rules that can be video reviewed. Here are the circumstances they can be used in. So that how about being proactive instead of reactive?
Right. But
I think it would be really valuable.
Right. And I don't disagree with you. Worst case scenario from the mouth of Colin Campbell, head of hockey operations, is a deciding game in the playoffs. And there's a call that goes wrong, puck over glass, whatever, in overtime. And the outcome is determined by a penalty or a missed call, right? I'm like, I guess, but hasn't it been like that for decades, right? And so then to your point, well, number one, if you make it a coach's challenge, how many coaches in overtime in a playoff game, Ray, are applying coach's challenge on a scenario like that unless they're 100% sure that there was a bad call? You're not doing it because you're not going down 5-on-3 in overtime,
There's their safety net, why they don't think there'll be more reviews.
Yeah.
Because coaches aren't going to do it. I've got an idea to that. I don't think it should be the coach's responsibility. Why does the coach have to challenge a mistake by the official?
So you're saying the Situation Room should manage it?
If it's called over the glass penalty and it isn't, why should a coach have to be on the hook for that?
Right.
By the way, those reviews, there should be a time limit on them.
Agreed.
Because it's ridiculous to stand there and watch two. Yeah, but it's not. It's not. You get two linesmen over there splitting hairs on an offside call for 5 minutes. It's ridiculous. Yeah. I think they've got a $10 million clock.
Yeah.
As soon as they put the headsets on and they've established communication, start 90 seconds.
Yeah.
As soon as you've established, so you're not mucking around and they lose their review time while they're trying to get the communications right.
Yeah. And if you can't
I don't think it should be a coach's challenge. I think Dregs, it should not be a coach's challenge. It should come from the Situation Room. If you want to get it right, get it right. Put a 90-second time limit on it. Put a document out that tells you what is and is not reviewable, and then move on.
See, but I think that this is about public relations as well. And I think that the commissioner's office especially would rather it be a coach's challenge, because then it puts the onus on the coach, and the NHL can't botch it twice.
Okay, so now
you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, so they miss it the first time and then they review it and they miss it the second time.
Right.
Because they reverse it, correct?
Yes.
But to me, you're worried about something that's not to be worried about because you can say, we've got it right. That's what review's for.
Yeah. Wow.
Like I think I like video review. I think it's so muddy in too many places that instead of tacking rules on, clean it up so that everybody has an idea what is not the categories can be reviewed. Dregs, I'm telling you, in the playoffs last year, I talked to half a dozen coaches. Those guys can't agree on whether it's Monday or Tuesday most of the time. Every one of them said reviewing a goal or goalie interference where the penalty is an extra penalty is not right. Why should that be the coach's challenge? Either it is or it isn't. Should come from the situation room.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
And they're right.
Yeah.
By the way, you're now making that decision on your video coach's recommendation.
Right.
That poor guy is going to make a call on a decision that might cost the team $1 million or $2 million or $10 million if they get bumped out of a series because of it.
Yeah.
It's not right.
Imagine, you know what? The commissioner years ago, the reason that there's any video review at this point is because Matt Duchene was 12 feet offside back in the day, right? With Colorado. Yep. And so the league said, well, we can't have that. You know, I mean, it was embarrassing for the National Hockey League. But Bettman at that time, when they introduced initially the video review, said, be careful because there will be unintended consequence, and we're living it now. We're seeing it. It's not about good goal versus bad goal. Now we're overturning penalties, or worrying about judgment calls by the officials based on video.
By the way, how many times do they get the puck over the glass wrong? Never. It is amazing. You look at that replay 5 times and you go, man, they got it right again.
How did they get that? Yeah. One other thing as we wrap up headlines. I mean, the only reason I'm trying to minimize the amount of discussion on the general managers meetings because, in fairness, the game is pretty good, right? So they don't have a whole lot of reason to pull it apart. One of the talking points was fights after clean hits. And it's not viewed as a big issue. Maybe you view it as a bigger issue because you do those games. You analyze those games and you see it as much of it as anybody in hockey, period. And we do see it too much, but I think the emphasis is, and it's not like Stephen Walken, the head of officiating, is going to send, a staff email to all his officials to say, hey, damn it, start calling the instigator penalty. I mean, but it's there. Like, the deterrence is obvious, isn't it? Either call an instigator if you feel it applies, or call an additional 2-minute minor for something else that led to the fight or the sequence. And it will probably get deterred just naturally, wouldn't it, by doing that?
If, like, I dislike the guy that makes the clean hit. Now he's got to fight.
Yeah.
This is a scenario we're talking about. I'm assuming they don't like to hand out the instigator because it carries a 10-minute misconduct with it. So call roughing.
Yeah, that's it.
Give a power play. If the hit is clean and there's no penalty on it and a fight ensues, chances are the guy that made the hit is not starting the fight. Yeah. There's no reason for him to start it. So give the other guys the extra penalty.
Right.
Dregs, one more thing I want to bring up really quick.
Yeah, of course.
They spoke at the meeting, and you would have the detail on it about the mandating in the future the cut resistant stuff.
Yeah.
For wrist guards and legs,
socks. Yeah.
And the players, there's a comfort level and things like that they have to talk through.
Yes.
We just talked about Arturi Lehkonen and Ryan O'Reilly with broken fingers out of the lineup. To me, this all goes together. Guys wear gloves today with no cuffs, and they're like mitts. They're like mittens that you wear in the winter. They get a pair of gloves in the morning. They wear them in the game that night. There's very little to no protection in them.
Yeah.
And I really wonder why the Players Association doesn't have a discussion with their players and thereby with the equipment manufacturers trying to get a little more protection in the gloves.
Yeah. Interesting.
Because the gloves are so light, Dregs, they could easily extend the cuff.
Yeah.
And the guys wouldn't even notice it. They really wouldn't. I think I had pretty good hands. I had cuffs up to my bloody elbows. And these things weighed about 3 pounds each. Yeah. They were terrible compared to today's gloves. They could easily make a glove that is protective of the fingers, thumbs, and wrists.
Yeah.
That is light enough for the players. I think it's a foolish chance they take.
So Rod Pasma, who works inside hockey operations, he's the head of the equipment subcommittee that works with the NHLPA, right, on all of this. Made a presentation here yesterday in Florida to the GMs. Apparently the video that he showed, Ray, was off the charts graphic and gory and grotesque. He didn't do it to gross anybody out. The hope is that the managers take it back to their team and say, look, you don't have to look at this video, but here's some of the injuries, Evander Kane, Ryan Johansson, that have been documented this year. Have a look at it. If you're even remotely on the fence about whether you should be wearing, cut-resistant sleeves or the socks or some of the other protection, watch this video. I guess it was just ridiculously bad, but it left them, no pun intended, it left a mark with all of the general managers in attendance there. So those are your headlines. Our interviews on Ray and Dregs this season brought to you by our good pals at Canadian Club Whiskey, who are asking, are you over beer? So why not try a refreshing CC ginger ale with lime next time you're having a drink or watching a game?